Welcome to episode 20 of Mental Mastery, where I interview the world's greatest minds on what it takes to live an epic life. Today I have the absolute honor of speaking with one of the greatest athletes of all time, US gymnast Shannon Miller, who has won an astounding 7 Olympic medals and 9 World Championship medals between 1991 and 96. After winning 2 Olympic gold medals at the age of 19, Shannon retired and now uses a company, Shannon Miller Lifestyle, to promote a healthy and balanced life. Today, we took a deep dive into the gold medal mindset and what it takes to succeed at the highest level.
So one of the most interesting things I think about your career is that, by the time you were 15, when, most kids barely stop playing with their toys, you were already at such a world-class level. You'd won 5 Olympic medals and, you'd already had trained for 10 years by then. So at what point did the Olympics become a goal for you for the first time? Or did you even think about hey, I want to win an Olympic medal? When you were 15?
No, I don't ever think I even had the thought process of I want to win an Olympic medal all that much. When I was 5, I started gymnastics and I kind of fell into it. I think my parents were starting to get upset that my sister and myself, we were jumping on the furniture and trying to learn steps and basically ruining their furniture and hurting ourselves. So in gymnastics and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I didn't ever think about the Olympics. I'd never seen the Olympics. I didn't know anything about this thing called gymnastics, but I enjoyed doing it. And then as the years went by, I started to compete. And then once I started competing, I kind of had that competitive bug. And I think I've always been competitive in whatever I'm doing, really mostly with myself, just to kind of do the very best I think I can do. So that for me, that was kind of the first phase of, okay, I want to compete at the state competition and then the regionals and then the nationals. And then I made the national team. And for me to be able to put on that red, white, and blue uniform and go compete for my country and do something that's so much bigger than just me was really amazing. And then I guess I was maybe around 11 or 12 years old. I went to one of my first international competitions in Italy. And I finally stayed on all 4 events. So I was really excited. I did all during the meet. And by the end of the competition, my name was atop the leaderboard.
Wow.
And it was the first time that had ever happened, certainly in an international competition. But I had never won anything in the U.S. nationally. So for me, this was a big deal. And I got to stand on that first place podium and see the American flag being raised and hear the national anthem. And I just remember that moment being the moment that I actually thought to myself, I really want to go to the Olympics. I want to represent my country on the biggest stage possible. And for a gymnast, that's the Olympic Games. And so that was for me kind of the moment. And then it was only a couple years after that I was actually moving towards the Olympic trials.
You're right there. Yeah, it went so quickly, once you actually got great. Yeah, it was so quickly. So it's really fascinating. How do you learn to deal with the pressure that comes with that, with all the media attention? I know in your state, you're really big. We just talked about you almost like a hero for most people there, right? So how do you learn to deal with all that kind of attention and pressure?
Well, I think there's kind of 2 types of pressure. There's the pressure in sport that you want to hit your routines, you want to do a good job in the competition, and for me, I would take the pressure off by doing the work. For me, it's about the work. If you do the work every single day in the gym, then whatever happens at the competition, you can be proud of. And you're not always going to be perfect. Rarely are you going to be perfect. But that doesn't mean you didn't do the work and you didn't try your hardest. So I always felt the most confident when I knew that I was prepared. And so that's kind of how I would take the pressure off. The other portion of that is my education. A lot of parents ask me about balancing education and gymnastics and sport. And how do you do that? And I looked to what my parents did, and they really made education first and foremost. So for me, every now and then you'll see the kids wearing the shirts that say gymnastics is life. Well, for me, gymnastics wasn't life. Okay. It just wasn't. Education came first, my family and chores and everything else. Then if I did a good job at those things, I had the opportunity to go to the gym. And my parents were very supportive of my career, but they really helped me understand that gymnastics is not life. Life is life. So let's keep perspective. And that helped me kind of keep the pressure off. But as far as media, I think for me, another thing that my parents did that was really helpful. And of course I'm a little old, so we didn't have social media at the time. It wasn't available. So you weren't constantly being inundated with it. You had to pick up a newspaper or turn on the TV and watch a competition. And so my parents just taught me, don't read your media. Do not read your media, because whether it's bad or whether it's good, that shouldn't affect how hard you work in the gym. It just shouldn't. So, do your thing, enjoy what you're doing, and just don't worry about the rest.
Wow, yeah, it definitely sounds like your parents did a great job there of kind of like shielding you from too much pressure. And also the point
I think so, but I'm biased. So.
Of course, who isn't? But you also, the point that you made about, just working hard and being confident because you put in the work. In one of the other interviews, I read this quote from you where you talked about, your coach was being interviewed, and he said that, you weren't the most talented, but you would always do the little bit extra more than anyone else, right? So where did that come from? Was that something that your parents and trainers instilled in you? Or was it something that you just decided consciously, hey, I always want to outwork everyone?
So the story is he was sharing with this reporter that I was not the most talented. And the reporter kind of asked him and kind of made it sound like, oh, I was so easy to work with because I was so talented. And Steve Nuno, my coach, he said, no, she wasn't the most talented athlete in his gym. I wasn't the strongest. I wasn't the most flexible. I wasn't the most powerful, but he said she was my hardest worker. He asked us to do, 50 push-ups, I'd do 55, run 10 laps, I'd do 12. I always did just a little bit more. And for me growing up, I don't know if it's just something that I was born with or something that my parents helped cultivate, because I was so young. I don't really, anything different. But I think for me, it's the idea and the observation of, okay, so I know that these areas, I don't have the Mary Lou Retton, the Simone Biles legs, right? So areas, I can work on that and I can do the conditioning, but what are the areas that I can help in? And I knew that for me, the mental game was going to be a big deal. That's where I could kind of edge out the competition. And the other part is just, I could outwork anyone. I would do the work. And as you know, for most kids, not everyone's willing to do the work, and not everyone truly understands that the work you do today not only matters for today, but it matters for tomorrow and for 5 years from now and ultimately 10 years down the road. I look back and I think, doing 10 extra sit-ups when I was 9 years old, not a big deal. 10 extra sit-ups, whatever, does it really matter? But then I think 10 extra sit-ups 6 days a week for 10 years.
That's the difference.
Kept me on the balance beam when I needed it most.
For sure. So it's really the compounding effect of just kind of putting in the work every single day, right? And I think what most people, people can do is they kind of show up on the good days, right? When they feel good, when everything's nice, then they show up. What happens, on the days when you don't feel good, where you're really just tired or frustrated or sick? So how do you, push yourself, whether it's in the gym or, in life or business, whatever it is? How do you push yourself to still show up even on the days where you really don't feel like it?
Well, I think that's a really important point, because it's easy to be on during the good days, right? When you feel great and things are going your way. Well, it's easy to be on. It's how do you make sure that you're on when nobody's watching? It's the stuff that happens when the cameras aren't rolling, the judges aren't watching. It's in the gym. It's what we call the grind. In the hot, sweaty, nasty, smelly gym, it's not sparkly leotard in front of 10,000 of people cheering for you. It's what happens in those moments that really matters. And in trying to get young athletes to understand that is so important. I think for me, it always came back to goals. So I was a huge, and still I am, a huge goal setter. And for me, it's yes, you have to set the long-term goal. And yes, you have to set the short-term goals leading up to that long-term goal. So what are the things I can go in and I can work on every single day, whether it's for work or for family or for gymnastics? What can I work on today that will matter for tomorrow? And I think goals are really important, but I think the most important part of goals is understanding that anyone can have goals. We can all have goals, but if we don't actually take the steps, if we don't actually do the work every single day, then we're never going to get to the ultimate goal. So just understanding that the follow through is so important. And that means on even the toughest days. And so for me, I would actually write down my goals on an index card, and I'd have my long-term goals on one side, and I had my short-term goals on the other. And on my really tough days when I didn't feel like going to the gym or there was an injury or I didn't feel good that day, I would look at that index card and I would know that if I didn't go into the gym and I didn't work on X, Y, and Z and check them off my list, guess what? The other side was never going to happen. And so it was looking at those goals every single day that really helped me stay the course.
Wow, I love that. That is such a great idea of having like the kind of direct consequences there, right? Like if I don't put in the work today, then like this long-term thing is not going to happen. I think that's what not enough people realize is like every single day matters, right? Especially, you know, if you want to be world class and like win Olympic medals, then like every single day matters. So I love that concept of having kind of
and that's what I tell everyone. I tell everyone gold medals are not won on the day of competition. They're won with the years of hard work and preparation that happened before you even stepped on the floor.
Oh, for sure.
It's the prize at the end for all of the hard work.
For all of the hard work, yeah. That is true. Now, you mentioned mental preparation before and how it was key to your success. Yeah. So what kind of routines did you have, you know, before going to a competition like the Olympics? How do you prepare mentally for that?
I think I was always preparing mentally. It was kind of a constant for me. It wasn't, oh, there's a big competition coming up, so now I'm going to start mentally preparing myself. It was and again, it remains part of my preparation always for anything that I'm doing. You're going through the motions. I think there's the visualization that we talk so often about. And I think that's part of the mental side of it. Can you visualize yourself performing that routine perfectly in your mind? Because if you can't even see yourself in your own mind competing and performing perfectly or doing that great presentation in front of the board or whatever that is, then you're likely not going to have the confidence to make it happen when it's time. So visualization and preparing and seeing yourself doing things the right way is so important. And then I think the other side of the mental aspect is just trying to keep things in perspective, I guess, trying to make sure that when you go into a competition, you are prepared in a manner that will help best allow you to compete. So I always say, compete like you train, train like you compete. So every time I went up on balance beam during training, whether it was the first beam routine or the 12th beam routine, I was at the Olympic Games. This was one shot. This is all I get. Pressure on myself. And I visualized, you know, hundreds of thousands of people watching. And then I was able to just kind of tune them out and focus. And then when I went into a regular competition, guess what? Hundreds of thousands of people watching, tune out and go. I think that's really a skill that you have to master by really just working on it over and over and over. And I think it comes probably more naturally to some athletes than others. I think it came very naturally for me, probably because I was such a shy child growing up that I kind of lived in my head. I didn't talk to people. I just kind of lived in my head. So I kind of already lived in this bubble where I kind of naturally did a lot of this mental stuff anyway. But sometimes you do have to learn it. And it is a skill I think people can learn.
Wow, that's so interesting, especially this part of, you know, constantly like visualizing yourself, like being out there, you know, performing at the world's greatest stage, even if like you're only in the gym, you know, practicing just like a normal Tuesday, right? And I think if like we all approach kind of life and everything we do in that way of like today's game day, no matter what day it is, you know, then everything we touch is going to be better, right? And
I do. I love that. Today's game day. It's always game day.
It's always game day every day.
Always be ready.
Yes. So you touched on like focus before and kind of like just like avoiding those distractions, you know, I mean, when you're in the stadium, you know, tens of thousands of people watching and, you know, even more around the whole world, you know, there's this incredible noise and people shouting and cheering. How do you like block all of that out? Because, you know, the thing is like, you only have so like a few seconds to, you know, kind of show off what you've been practicing for years or decades. So how do you make sure that like those few seconds really like are the best that you can possibly do?
I think tuning out and kind of blocking out what's going on around you is, again, another skill that you have to learn. And you learn by just competing a ton of times. I mean, I would just compete every weekend. And, you know, you do well at some and not so well at others, but you learn more than just the skills. You learn more than just, whether I win or lose a competition. For me growing up, it was never about, did I win or lose the competition? It was, what did I learn at this competition? So I learned a lot of great lessons throughout my competition years that all kind of culminated in the end of my career, learned each time. And so a lot of what I learned was how to block out what's going on around me And you do that in practice as well. Any gymnast knows you're usually practicing with a ton of people around. You have the preschoolers, they might dash across a piece of equipment. So you've got to be kind of watching and listening and really just a great observationist. And then you learn when you can tune it in and when you can tune it out. And you have to get really good at it. You have to be able to kind of turn it on and off, just like you were turning on and off. And I feel like I got really, really good at that point, and I could use the crowd when I needed to use the crowd for that adrenaline rush at the last pass of my floor exercise routine, and I was dying and I needed that extra adrenaline. I could bring them in, I could use the applause. But then there were other times on balance beam when I just needed to focus. And so I just blocked out everything going on around me. It was as if I was in there alone.
Wow.
and nobody was there. So it's just a skill that you have to work on over and over and over, and you have to be willing to fail along the way.
Yeah, that is really such a common theme here, like especially like between really every like great athlete that I've been interviewing on the show is, it's always about like practicing the basics, right? Kind of practicing like those fundamental skills of visualization or like learning how to focus or positive self-talk, whatever it is, really mastering those aspects. So I love that. And so one of the things I love to do here on the show is celebrate failures as kind of a stepping stone towards success. So do you have a favorite failure in your life? Anytime that, you failed and you really didn't do as well as you wanted to, but then later on it helped you, it taught you some important lessons?
I have a lot of failures. People like to remember me for the highlights of my career. But there are a lot of failures along the way. And probably one that sticks out the most to me, because it happened so early in my career, it was my first state competition. I was so excited. I just started competing that year. I made it to the state meet. I was going out there and I fell off the beam on a left step out. I'll never forget. And it just me. But then I had already kind of started learning this important lesson of getting back up. And I have plenty of time to cry about that later. But right now I'm in the middle of a beam routine. I'm being timed. So get back up on the beam, try to make, minimize any deductions that you have going forward and just do the best you can moving forward. And you'll, it'll be what it's going to be. And by the end of the competition, I actually ended up winning the state meet. And for me, it was less about the win, but more about the understanding of, oh, you can fall and win. And in life, guess what? You can fall and win. The failures are what you use to kind of propel you forward. And for me, looking back, I'm so proud and happy. Well, maybe not proud, but I'm very thankful for that failure, because it reminded me during the 96 Olympic trials, when I fell on beam on the first event, that, okay, this has happened before. Okay. And ended up, of course, winning that competition and making the team. And then, at the Atlanta Olympics in 96, I had a little step out of bounds on floor, which lost me a chance of an all-around medal that night. I had a miss on vault, which was kind of one of those out of the blue type things. And then I had to come back for balance beam. So it kind of was a reoccurring theme in my career, but I learned that lesson very early on.
Well, it's amazing that you learned that lesson so early, and then later on, it became so important when the competition was even bigger. I think that's super powerful, really. And then also the ability to just kind of bounce back from failures, right? To as soon as you realize hey, I messed that up, then instead of beating yourself up over it and constantly thinking about it, getting right back in the game is so powerful. So I love that.
It's so important. Just really getting back up after a fall, after a failure, after a mistake. And it happens in every part of our life. We have to kind of pick ourselves up, understand that we have plenty of time to be sad about it later, but in this moment, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to react?
Sure. So one of the, hardest times in your life certainly was when you were diagnosed with cancer and you kind of had to pick yourself back up again and kind of rebuild yourself. So what are some lessons from sport that kind of helped you get through those tough times?
A cancer diagnosis is just so difficult in so many ways. And I think everyone's cancer journey is a little bit different. But I think there are some things that are common throughout the diagnosis and treatment and this journey and this what we call the new normal. And I kind of reverted back at one point to kind of my competitive mentality. And I think that was healthy for me. I hadn't used a lot of the lessons I learned through sport in between retiring and then now at this point being diagnosed. And for me, it was switching back to, okay, goals. What are my goals now? It's not an Olympic medal. Today, during chemo, it might be to get up and get dressed and to walk around the dining room table. If I can do that today, it's a great day. So your goals may change significantly, but you still have to have those goals. We don't always know where we're going to end up. So my goal was never, to be cured or to, there's some things that are a little bit outside of our control. But what we can be in control of is kind of the way we handle each and every day and what those things can be. Positive attitude, the importance of having a positive attitude, the importance of teamwork and understanding that you have so much team around you. It's not just the medical staff, but it's friends and family and neighbors and people that are willing to help out. So sometimes it's difficult, especially for type A people like me, but let them help. Let them help. They want to help. You need the help. It's all about focusing on getting better. So
for sure, yeah.
Just accept the help. And which was a very big learning experience for me. But eventually I realized that it was so important, and I'm so happy and thankful for those people that jumped in and helped out. But those are some of the things that I learned through sport that really I apply not just to my cancer journey, but really every aspect of my life. It's important. And I think those lessons that you do learn in sport, whether or not you were an Olympian or if you played any level of sport, you still get these lessons kind of ingrained. And if you remember to utilize them, which I kind of forgot for a few years, but remember to utilize them, it can really
actually
help.
now that you touched upon it, like you kind of had this transitional moment in between, sports and that. How was it, being from at 19, when you won 2 Olympic gold medals to, being like this sort of normal student, right? Like you went, to school, to study. How was like the transition there, because I think like it's always, so important to have like this kind of vision that's bigger than like your past has been. So how was that transition going to like normal student life?
It's hard to top Olympic gold. Yes. It was challenging. And I know it's challenging for so many athletes, not just Olympic, but professional and collegiate, to have sport and have that family that comes with sport. You're working out with your team every day. You're traveling with your team. You kind of have that constant support. Also the scheduling, just being expected to be at a certain place at a certain time, do a certain number of things. That structure goes away very quickly. And I'm very thankful that my parents did put education first. I had started taking some collegiate courses while I was training for the Atlanta Games. And so I continued. I went back to college after I retired and moved on to campus. And so that was also a little bit odd because I didn't have my parents right there. I grew up and lived and trained at home in Oklahoma. So for me, I led a very normal life outside of gymnastics. But now that I didn't have any gymnastics at all, I'd never known that. I'd never known life without gym. And so for me, it went really toward my health. I was going to school and that was great. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and who Shannon Miller was outside of being a gymnast. But at the same time, I was still eating my 6 full meals a day like I would.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, I know from experience.
So, you deal with the weight gain and you deal with how do I eat healthy as a, kind of quote non-athlete, and you start trying to figure things out. And so, it just took me a few years to kind of figure out who and what I wanted to be. And I'm not sure I even know that right now, but
yeah, it's a constant process,
I have a little
right?
bit more of a path and things. It's a process. And I think that's what's really hard about it is going to the Olympics is, yes, it's a process, but it is a very defined goal. It's a well-defined goal. You know exactly what you have to do to get there. Life isn't that easy. You don't always know exactly what job you want to have 10 or 15 years from now and then know exactly the process and the steps to get there. The ball's moving all the time. And so you have to just kind of keep up. And what I learned, I think, over the years was as long as I'm doing something that I enjoy and something that helps others, then I feel really good about myself. And so if I can do that, then I'm pretty happy.
Good direction to move towards. And you're definitely doing great things there, with your speaking and your videos and everything. And I mean, one thing that really is so clear in everything is that like you have this incredibly positive attitude towards everything, right? Like in every interview, everything, you're always smiling. So how did it, like, is that something that you had to develop over time? Like that you had to like consciously work on?
For me, I think so, because I'm very analytical and I'm very like logic oriented, and so it's easy for me to think of all of the kind of the negative things that could happen. So, and especially once you have kids, you're constantly thinking something could happen. So for me, I do have to work on being positive, and I have to constantly remind myself to choose the positive route. And it's always a work in progress. And I don't think that you can necessarily be positive 24/7. And I don't think that's expected. But I think that if on most days we can wake up and we can look at the good around us and think of something, no matter how small it is, there's always something positive. And if we kind of grasp onto that, then we create this kind of positive aura. We're able to set a good example for others. And I know when I'm around positive people, I become more positive. So I want to be that person in the room that is the yay sayer, the go-getter, the one with the can-do attitude, the one that looks at solutions instead of problems. And I feel better when I'm focused on being positive. And that doesn't mean just putting a smile on your face. I think a positive attitude comes from within.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So do you have any favorite mantras or quotes that you like to repeat to yourself throughout the day or live by?
Oh, goodness. I don't know if I have any mantras, so to speak. There's one thing that we talk to our kids about a lot, and that's just 3 things each day that we should always do. Just no matter what, we should always do, no matter how old you are. And that is, number 1, learn something. You learn something new. We get to learn something new every single day, no matter how big or small. The second is to laugh. There's always something to laugh about and to find that joy, even on the most difficult day. So finding the humor in things. And then the third thing is to say something kind to someone else. We can always find one person we can just reach out and say something kind to. And you never know when one small word or one small act is truly going to help someone pick up their day or take that next step forward or give them hope. So I think those 3 things, if we can kind of do that each day, it's a good start.
Well, I love that, especially that you're already teaching that to your children. I think they're 5 and 8, right? So it's such a young age that you're already instilling those lessons in them. That's amazing. So what do you think holds people back, or is the number one thing that holds people back from achieving the big dreams in their lives? Whether it's going to Olympics or, running kind of business, whatever it is.
I think there's 2 things that often hold us back. Number 1 is fear of failure. What if I don't make it? What if I disappoint people? What if it doesn't work? What if it's not my time? What if it's not the right time? What if I don't have the ability? So there's all those things that other people tell us, but we also tell ourselves that lead us to just not get started. And that's kind of the second part is we just don't get started, right? How many times do we set New Year's resolutions and they're done by February? So we have to actually take those steps. We have to write it out. What's the plan? And then we have to work the plan every single day if we want to achieve those goals. So actually getting out there and doing it each and every day, and just, not being afraid to fail. Failure is going to happen. And frankly, it should happen. If you're not failing, you're not challenging yourself enough, I think.
Amen to that, for sure. I love that. So before I ask my final question, where can listeners connect with you online? What's your favorite platforms, favorite ways to reach out?
So my website is easy. It's shannonmiller.com. And you can reach me on all my social media there. But Twitter and Instagram are probably the ones I use most often. And those are Shannon Miller 96, of course. And then since those were taken on Facebook and Pinterest, on those, I'm Shannon Miller Official.
That's good too. So final question, what does mental mastery mean to you?
I think mental mastery for me would mean being in active control of my thoughts and thought process. I think a lot of times we move through the day and we let things happen to us instead of being in an active role for kind of pushing what we want out there. And so I think when we master that mental portion, we're better able to control what's going on in our lives and how we react to things. And whether that is the visualization, whether it is what I like to say, fake it till you make it, which is sometimes pretending that you're confident over and over and over so much that you actually then become confident. So there's different ways that you can look at the mental aspect, but I think mental mastery is being able to really control your thoughts and your thought process instead of letting other things affect you and happen to you.